Hey, it's Bond. Let's talk about gaming. So this is a video I have a kind of an interesting thought about even making, because I think there's an aversion to making videos and putting content out there that you're afraid may not be taken the right way. Maybe you won't explain yourself correctly, or maybe you're just wrong and you don't realize it before you send it off into the world. I have the advantage of, one, not having the biggest audience in the world, so I'm not super worried about too many people seeing this. But as well as, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't really have any hard and fast opinion. So to get into it without dancing around too much, there's been a lot of talk for the last few years, really, but especially in the last couple of weeks, about gaming community toxicity, and especially when it comes to how the gaming communities interact directly with community developers and gaming developers in general. Community developers, comm devs, whatever you call them, are game devs. Yeah, they don't put the pixels on the screen, but they don't have to. They're still a really key part of game development. And so to get right out there so that there's no misconstruing of this, it's never okay to threaten a game developer, to threaten their life, to intimidate them, to dox them, and do a bunch of weird, gross stuff that unfortunately has become too common, and that we've seen especially with Bungie and the Destiny 2 devs recently, which has caused them to pull back a lot on how much they are interacting with their community and so on and so forth. But I know of it happening with the Division from Ubisoft Massive and Red Storm and some of their other studios, and it happens all over the place. We've seen it with, especially when games have troubled releases and things like that. But sometimes just because they patch something that people liked, and those people decide that threatening lives and being weird internet warriors is the way to handle it. So here's a full stop. That is bad. Nothing I say from here on out is going to be trying to say that any of that is ever okay, and to not downplay that at all. Terrible. I have even argued that you shouldn't even directly go at particular devs with your criticisms of a game. Go after the account for the game, or the publisher, or the developer, like the main account. So you're not going after one individual, because I promise there is not a single game where there's a single individual that you can blame for whatever you're mad about. These things happen in big cloud decisions of multiple people and layers of decision making and stuff like that. So that said, I do think an interesting part of this conversation has been, a thing happens, a dev or a publisher or a studio talks about it or shows it, like, hey, like Bungie did with, or individual devs at Bungie, showing that people were sending them pizzas and threatening messages and voicemails and a bunch of creepy crap, and they're actually taking some people to court, which is amazing. That's that accountability is how you at least make some people stop doing this stuff, even with the anonymity of the internet, because that legal action they're taking is taking this person who thought they were anonymous and putting a real name onto a court document and taking them to court. There's more to that story. I suggest you look it up. But another thing I've noticed is how there's two things I've noticed that happen as well. Sometimes when a very small number of people in a community go way too far and get really awful and do really terrible stuff, you'll start to see kind of a blanket response to any negativity, or even just any criticism at all. A game I can think of that definitely happening with was Cyberpunk 2077. They released that game. They had hyped it up for years. They basically sold it as something it just wasn't, and it's never going to be. And that was a purposeful marketing decision by CDPR. There was also the issues with them, just basically hiding the performance issues on the at the time current gen, but the last gen hardware, with them not sending out review codes and doing a bunch of stuff where they knew it was bad. They just didn't want to fess up to it. And that game came out, it had lots and lots of issues, and lots of people were upset, and some went way too far. Again, not forgiving that action, doing things that are completely unacceptable. But then what I also noticed was that there was a turn where, a handful or a small number of people went way too far and were justifiably shouted down, called out. Totally cool. Then what you saw was that really almost any criticism or any negativity towards the game, even if it was fairly valid and not directed at any individuals, not threatening, not what I would call inappropriate, would kind of get shouted down in the same way. And that was from like a fan and kind of dev point of view. And then what we also see in these situations are what I would call like gaming personalities will go off and do a thing where they basically will just make these blanket statements of like, being mean to game devs is bad. And it's like totally fair. That's a totally reasonable statement to make. Maybe even I've done this. So I'm gonna make this video. Maybe you can jump on my Twitter and find some example of me doing this, and you can call me out for it. Fine, that's totally cool. What it is, and I hate the word because it's become so politicized, at least here in the United States, unfortunately, I think the best way to describe what I'm talking about is like virtue signaling, where you're basically just you're taking an issue like this abuse of game developers. You as a non-game dev are saying just an obvious thing, and you're maybe doing it to kind of prop yourself up, to show everyone, I am very compassionate and I'm on the right side of things. Shower me with retweets and likes and comment about how right I am because I'm saying this thing that is generally accepted, right? But I hate calling it virtue signaling because that has such a connotation now of being, calling things virtue signaling that are just people being decent. And maybe that's what's happening here. And I bet it is most of the time, but sometimes it's not. So what's my point? I don't know. I'm going to be straight up. I'm just making this because I just had to get these thoughts out. And maybe that's going to be a good or a bad thing in the long run. I don't know. But I guess for me, it's just a matter of, like, this isn't like an either or situation. It doesn't have to be. For me, it's a matter of treating game developers, especially individuals, but really in general, with really extreme amounts of toxicity and threats and intimidations and stuff, 1000% unacceptable. Should be legally handled when necessary, should be called out, should be shut down. Totally fine. Criticism and even some negativity, is fine as well. Here's a secret. Here's the thing I think like 99% of feedback that gamers give, completely useless, has no use at all to developers, and basically anything most gamers say can be ignored because game devs can get way more information that's useful from like analytics and stuff, from how people are playing their game. And I think that's how most decisions are made or should be made, because the random goofball on Twitter like myself doesn't understand the context and the implications and everything. We just see things and we spit it out, and hopefully it's this like criticism thing I'm talking about. That still doesn't mean it needs to be listened to. So being toxic and cruel and awful is bad. It's still okay to criticize, and that should be allowed, and that shouldn't be grouped into the same thing. And I really hope that people are careful either with making statements simply just to look good to other people. And I think people should be careful about supporting people who are doing that, because I don't think they're helping the conversation at all. And if anything, I think they're only helping themselves and drawing attention to the bad people in the first place, and they really aren't supporting devs or anything. So don't be dicks. It's still okay to criticize reasonably, but you're probably going to get ignored like you should be. And don't pat yourself on the back because you're on the right side of things. That's this video. Maybe this was pointless. Maybe it wasn't. Let me know what you think down below. If you agree, if you disagree. I'm curious. This can be a conversation. I hope I didn't say anything too silly or something that may be misconstrued. And I'm willing to have more of a conversation with it. either down in the comments. Maybe I can make another video over on Twitter or in my Discord. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So there's that. Support me and my content, my stream, my podcast, the EchoCast, all of that stuff on Patreon at patreon.com/bondiesel. Follow the YouTube, subscribe, leave comments, like the video. Check me out on Twitter at bondiesel, and that's where I'm gonna leave this one. So until next time.